Resident Evil 6 was always a game that struggled on the original Switch. Combining the unstable performance with an uncapped frame rate and a static resolution meant that the experience was inherently flawed. Let's see how the Switch 2 boosts this unpatched title to see if we can lock to 60 FPS. Looking at the very opening section of the game, the Switch 1 is far from delivering a stable experience. I wanted to note some of these drops are due to the screen cutting to black when Leon blinks. Regardless, even slowly walking through this corridor, we get inconsistent performance. Honestly, it wouldn't have been perfect since the game does drop below 30 FPS, but it would have been improved if a cap had been implemented in my opinion. Flipping over, the Switch 2 is basically flawless. Keep in mind those frame drops aren't actually occurring and are due to the black screens too though. The corridor segment is also locked, which is pretty impressive considering how it was performing before. Cutting to this scripted running section, which happens a bit later in the same level, we see the performance difference in real time. Switch 2 is flatlining at the 60 mark, whereas the original machine is fluctuating pretty heavily around 30 FPS. Hitting as low as 24 FPS and as high as 44 FPS in some moments. After that Prelude mission, the game splits off into multiple different campaigns. I obviously didn't test them all, and kept to the starting missions to avoid spoilers. This is to say I'm not promising that other areas of the game will perform exactly the same. The Switch 2 could exhibit worse performance in certain areas. Anyways, this is the first mission of Chris's campaign. The Switch 1 is struggling to hold 30 FPS, only reliably keeping it when we're not looking out at the city streets. This gets even worse when we breach this door, revealing the same street full of civilians, cars, fire effects, and a helicopter flying over above, all working to tank that frame rate into the mid to low 20s. Though progressing through the level to the more simpler areas does see performance stabilize.
They're killing unarmed civilians. They're gonna really love us.
The same area on the Switch 2 begins smoothly, but as soon as we breach that same door, we soon find out it's far from perfect. I was pretty skeptical of this, so I retested a few times, but sadly ended up with the same result. But the further we get into the street, the more it improves, so it's not really a big deal. But it suggests other heavy areas of the game will suffer the same fate. Jumping a bit further in and putting them directly side by side, we see what is likely the average experience between the two, which is typically a doubling or more in performance. During these admittedly pretty basic combat encounters, the Switch 1 is still dropping below 30 FPS. Most cutscenes are thankfully in-engine too, meaning we see the Switch 2 brute force this up to 60 FPS. Also, don't mind the weird framerate issues in the graph. I'm pretty sure the software is having some issues with the black borders. It's probably seeing them as tearing or something.
Not like back home.
I really wanted to get into some sort of multiplayer match with a bunch of people, but from what I've seen, these modes are essentially dead, especially during my times. So I jumped into a solo match of the Mercenaries No Mercy, and honestly what you've seen so far has been pretty cut and dry, but here's where things get a little more interesting. Starting off with only a few zombies in view, things are as you've already seen. But progressively as more zombies spawn and start to swarm the player, the Switch 2 starts to perform the worst we've seen so far. Whenever the large crowd is on screen, the console typically hovers around 40 to 45 FPS. It's still much better than the alternative, but it shows that the Switch 2 doesn't completely solve every messy situation from old ports. RE6 also features a local split-screen co-op, letting you complete most campaign missions and some side modes with a friend. So for the final FPS comparison, let's take a look at how it runs. First up with the Switch, and even before we hit the infamous street, things are rough. Sadly, this first street is also where we see the game tank below 20 FPS. Later areas such as the tighter corridors and small combat sections do often run better, but any bigger location or set piece runs much worse, which is pretty obvious while playing. Alright, this is honestly the worst case scenario for the new machine. Frame rates dropping to the mid 30s isn't great. After this first look, the street itself fares much better, but I found other areas that do also experience some pretty noticeable drops. It can still reach its cap, but it struggles much more than just in single player. A little bonus comparison here, but I switched into the first mission of Leon's campaign to see if performance is similar between the two. What I found was that things are still far from stable. There are plenty of scenes here where we're running in the mid-20s. Moving to the Switch 2 for the final time, and things are once again improved but still pretty flawed. I will say, performance issues when playing in co-op are much less noticeable compared to single player due to how small those gameplay windows actually are in practice, especially if you're running it off a monitor or a smaller TV. Before this video finishes, let's take a quick look at loading times. And like my previous videos, we see around a halving in the amount of time it takes to load in from the game's main menu, from 14 seconds to 7. Anyways, that's all for now. Please do like the video if you enjoyed, dislike if you didn't, and subscribe if you want to see more of what I do. I'd really appreciate all of them. I'm thinking of testing Resident Evil 5 soon, or maybe Ark Survival Evolved. That's kind of one I've been wanting to do for a while, especially considering they basically announced they're working on porting Ascended over, which, God, I can't imagine how bad that's going to be. So please let me know down below if you want to see either of those. Bye.